Hey, good afternoon. How you doing,
Good
Brian?
noon. It is so good to talk with you. I haven't been able to really see you in like weeks.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, let's do our little banter up front because
Woo.
just for the sake of full disclosure, we've been talking for 20 minutes about this chapter in
Uh,
the book that we're going to get into, and we're like, we should be recording this. Well, let's go ahead and do some banter, and um, I'll tell you what I've been doing the past 2 weeks. I'll give you one guess.
Disc
Oh
golf.
yeah, that's right. Okay, good job. Yeah, had
What a
some.
sweating. Our AC went out a week ago.
Oh, that's right. You were telling me you were getting quotes for your AC, and
Yeah, out and it's I'm gonna get quotes. Yeah, yeah, but it's not gonna get installed till September.
yeah.
So
Did you?
opening closing them back up at night, before going to bed. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's 79 in here. Hey, it's feeling good.
I get it. I don't know what the weather was like here last week, but we were in Denver and we got there. It was 96 degrees,
Hmm.
and there was a thunderstorm that day. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. The next day, I guess it was like mid 80s thunderstorm. Next day was 96 and sunny. The next day was 66 and rainy. And the next
Wow.
day was high 70s with wind gusts of 40 miles per hour.
Oh my.
And then the next day was 80 with 100% humidity. So it
Ooh.
was like every day we got something different, which from a disc golf perspective makes things very interesting. Um, yeah, it was very challenging. And here it was just hot, right? And you had wildfires.
But not as hot as the week before. Yeah, it was like in the upper 80s this last week. So
Okay.
not like 90s. Much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tolerable. And yeah, I was very aware of the temperature.
Yeah.
And pull up my phone. Okay, so when do we open it? Okay, not 7:30, more like 8.
Gosh. And you didn't go to like Home Depot and buy one of the window bangers?
Oh, we have one. We have one. It's still, I mean, it's a big house. We had one for our bedroom.
Yeah.
We slept fine. But the rest of the house,
Miserable.
yeah, you know, especially when you have children who are 18 and think, oh, it's not a big deal to turn the oven on. Let's cook a pizza. No,
Mm-mm.
no. Ah,
Yeah. I, even with AC, I'm like, let's not use the oven. You know, let's not make it work overtime. And plus, you have to turn your AC up to get it cooler up above. So
right.
you're cold downstairs and you're still too warm upstairs. Anyway, oh, the weather. That's what we like to talk about. All right.
Uh, all right. We're back into the political gospel book that we've been going through. It's uh, it's about how to be nonpartisan in a very partisan culture and nation at the moment. Instead to be partisan for Jesus in that your primary allegiance is to Jesus, and how do we focus on that and not be right or left, but him, but for the kingdom primarily. That's kind of the core idea, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Although, I'm, if I may, we didn't talk about this beforehand. If I was going to stop right now and what we've read through basically chapter 6 and let's say pass judgment on whether this book is doing a good job or what kind of job this book is doing in terms of clarifying our position as Christians, I would say it has very much muddied for me. It We were talking beforehand, and I think we both felt this push pull in this most recent chapter where it's like, okay, that seems to make sense. Okay, where are you going? Like, oh, well, where'd that come from? Or you said this, and then you seem to contradict it in the next thing. And each chapter,
And he's redundant.
yeah, I'm like, didn't I just read that?
Yeah.
Each chapter, I find myself going, okay, maybe, and we've talked about this on the podcast, where we're like, I feel like he's laying the groundwork for him to clarify this stuff in the future, right? So he keeps kind of laying groundwork. And now, we're 60% through the book. I'm going, I don't know if we're going to get there.
Right.
So I say that because, this particular chapter, as I alluded to earlier, Brian and I spent 20 minutes effectively debating how we should interpret the author's intention about certain elements of this chapter. And we disagree, or we view it through from a slightly different perspective, which I think is healthy. This is an opportunity to kind of process these things, maybe be convinced or not convinced. And so do you want to dig into that, or any comments on what I just said?
Yeah, I agree. And I think
Power it off.
I think he could do a whole lot better. And it's annoying to me that I'm going to have to, at the end of this, probably have to do the harder work of figuring out what to do with this info. He's not doing it for me. And we can do some of that now. Especially since I want to before November, I would like to do a little series on this book, but I'm going to do a lot of work to figure out how to say what he's getting at.
It's pretty muddy. I think it's easier sometimes to identify how not to do things, or like when things are not done right, from a partisan politics inserting itself into the church, or vice versa. I sent Brian a video earlier today where initially, it was a pastor speaking about Christian nationalism and basically the concerns of what that is and how it impacts our church and how it's perceived in the world. And I sent it to him initially because I'm like, oh, this guy makes some interesting points. And then it went and leaned in hard on partisan politics. And that's something that I think Brian, both of us agree, is like, that's not the pastor's job.
Yeah. And it made me think, just from our brief interaction with it, is now we really need to define terms, which, you know what? Okay, I got so many things racing in my head.
Yeah, good.
Define terms. I think one of the things I'm going to end up coming from all of this is coming up with a small list of clear principles to apply. And this might be one of them, is whenever we're dealing with two people talking about religion, it is extremely helpful to define the terms. When you're talking about, oh, I believe in Jesus, well, who do you mean by Jesus, right? Oh, I believe Jesus saves. Okay, what do you mean by saves? And what you'll find, even if you talk to someone like who's a Mormon, they may basically agree with you if you define the terms, because they may not believe what their church says, but but what they actually believe might be in agreement with you. And so one of the basic principles of any kind of hot debate is, when you say that particular phrase, what do you mean by it? And in this case, like, what do we mean by Christian nationalism? What is that? I think we got to have a better answer to that.
Yeah. And we see the lack of agreement on definition is what certain powers or influential people, or people who are attempting to be influential, utilize against us in order to divide us, and really all in the name of gaining power, right? If we can keep people at odds from each other, then we can manipulate the way they think. And I had a friend who was involved in politics. This goes back 15, 16 years ago. And one of the things that he said to me, which obviously, still resonates with me is we're pretty much divided in like 50-50, right, between the major political parties. And so in an election, it's all about 1%. How do we gain 1%? And it's like, how do we find an issue that we can utilize to pull that 1% to our side and take it from the other side? And so there are certain issues that we didn't even perceive as issues until somebody told us we should,
and then,
right? And
manipulation of words changes a perspective. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example of one, not to take us too kind of far off, but there was something that Trump said a couple of weeks ago about Christians not having to vote again if they vote for him
Right.
in this election cycle. And the Progressive News took that and said, see, he's going to destroy democracy, and there will be no more elections. He's just going to be a king. And I'm like, I mean, I guess you could interpret it that way. I don't think that's what he was saying. In fact, the way I interpreted it was, listen, Christians, you're not getting out to vote like you should. So please just come out and vote this time. And then if you don't want to vote again, you don't have to. I'm not going to ask you to come back out. That's what he was saying in my mind.
Context, which we always need to do. I think that's probably more like what it is. But yeah, we do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all to just drive that. So definitions and understanding people in context and is huge. So that's all I wanted to say to begin with is we got to know what we're talking about whenever we're having a debate. So how do you want to do this?
Well, I mean, there was one thing in particular that we both kind of jumped right on. Do you want to go right to that piece, or do you want to kind of work our way into that?
You should decide.
Gosh, that's tough. Okay, well, let's start with the idea. There's a graphic at the beginning of the chapter, and it talks about kind of two options when it comes to how we interact with kind of partisan politics when we're looking to the government to solve as Christians, when we look too much to the government or one party or another to fulfill Christian values or to impose Christian values. And if our party is in power, then the option is with triumphalism, as in, yes, we're emboldened, things are going to turn out right because our party's in power and Christian values are going to, be imposed the way that we interpret them. And then if our party doesn't win, then there's escapism, the idea that evil is taking over, things are going to fall apart, I'm going to disengage from the world, or through or from political interactions or whatever. So that's kind of the first thing he talks about. And he does put in the middle, there's faithfulness and then pilgrim. He doesn't ever explain that middle section.
No.
So I was like, where are we going with that? I do agree. I was overly sensitive to George W. Bush beating John Kerry back in 2004. I leaned much more progressive at that time than I do now. I became a moderate as the years went on. And so I definitely kind of retreated. I stopped being engaged and trying to understand everything that was going on politically. I discovered it wasn't healthy for me. And it's just like, okay, whatever. This is going to be terrible. That kind of perspective. And I'd say I'm less likely personally to lean into triumphalism. I'm less likely to go, aha, so-and-so won, things are going to be great. I was happy when Obama won because I'm like, oh, we've got a black president. I think that's a good thing. But I wasn't like, let's go. What are all the policies? I'm like, well, I don't agree with that policy. And I didn't vote for him the next cycle. I voted for Mitt Romney. So you guys know where I'm at. I'm all over the dang place.
That's, yeah. It's not putting your hope in governments, is one of the principles. Is where do you, and I think we can circle back to that. One of the things that I started with that I was like, I don't agree with him, because there's a lot here I found I agreed with and I disagreed with. One of them right underneath that was that, governments are not our enemy. They can be. They can be.
Yeah.
It's not a black and white thing. It's not good. I mean, he spent a lot of time, rightly so, that governments, as he puts it, if they are virtuous, if they are doing what they're supposed to do, they are a force of good, and either way, they are an expression of God's sovereignty. Absolutely. But part of the principles involved we have to assume that the fall affects everything, including governments.
Yep.
There's no government, no policy, no person, no party that's going to be perfectly right. Mm-hmm. None, ever. Right. And so this is one of those kind of principles that we just got to kind of get in our head is, well, not every government's going to have some good sides and some are going to good and bad, and some are going to be better than others. We can go to the Nazi Germany typical mm-hmm. one. Well, killing lots of people, that's probably on the more bad side of things, right? And then there's others that are a little bit more encouraging the values and the principles that God would want, and that's a little better. And so it can be bad because and this is the part that drove me nuts in this this chapter, is later on he's going to end up saying there are times to protest because they're not being good. Like, okay, because sometimes they're not.
This topic throughout this book I found difficult to parse. As I was reading this on the couch, I got to this section, and I just, governments are not the enemy, and God's going to use this, and I'm like,
it's simple.
It's a little overly simple, and where I kind of landed on this is I'm trying to wrap my head around it is God used the government in Jesus' time to ensure that the prophecies were fulfilled, which meant that something terrible had to happen. And so does that mean that the government at that time wasn't the enemy? I would say they were. But if we had succeeded in fighting the government at that time and Jesus hadn't been crucified, then there's not that fulfillment of the prophecy. Well, is there anything that we could have done at that time that would have stopped God from ensuring that the prophecies were fulfilled? No. And so that's where I'm like trying to view it through the prism of nobody's perfect. Just because your guy got in doesn't mean the problems that where people are suffering are going to go away. They're still human. They're still going to screw up. And that God's still going to find a way to use those people to ensure that his ultimate will is fulfilled. Not in this moment, not next month, maybe not next 600 years or whatever. It's a big story going back, I'm just a page, right?
It's something he says a little bit later, that it's like that Paul on one hand walked on Roman roads that allowed him to really spread the gospel. Amazingly good thing. Yet at the same time, that very same government persecuted Christians. It's both, and we have to live in the tension.
Yeah.
We have to live. We don't want. We want a nice, simple thing, but it's better to just live in it and just have some basic principles that Like, there's always going to be a tension here. Yeah, governments are good and bad. I wrote there in my notes, they're like fire. Fire can be amazingly beneficial to human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Also can be amazingly destructive. It's amoral. It can be either way. It doesn't matter. It matters how it's used. Governments can be used in bad ways and good ways.
Yeah. I think taking from that, as you're thinking about November and putting things together, there's kind of two things that we're drawing from this, of this kind of cluttered mess. One is we shouldn't be putting our faith in government. And two, that people are flawed, and they are, regardless of who has the power at a political level, they are going to fail, and they're going to make mistakes, and that the kingdom is not going to be fulfilled through a political entity.
Right, and we just, yeah, we really got to get that solidly in our head. And if there's a fault that among the faults of Christian nationalism, in my mind, that's it, is that they're putting too much hope. Their hope is near term, and it's in a government. It's not in long-term Jesus returning and in him. It's in the next 50 years, 10, 20 years, and it's in a certain set of politicians are going to do it. And I think that's a bigger problem.
And a lot of the politics are fear-based, and that's not a religious thing. It's the people who aren't religious are just as susceptible to fear mongering as people who are Christian. The idea is, if I can make you scared, you're going to vote, or you're going to lean, or you're going to behave in a certain manner. And to me, that is kind of antithetical to who we are supposed to be in terms of living with hope, in spite of the failure of individuals at government.
Right. And I just wrote down, because I've been writing some notes, fear-based. Yeah, I definitely agree. Fear is a major motivator for all sides. And my note was, it's like a deficit in believing in the sovereignty of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is generally true, I think, of American Christianity anyhow, let alone the politics. Just on a personal, our God is very tiny, especially in this, in terms of how he deals with our own little lives and we just so champion free will to the point where we diminish the greatness of God, and the result is fear.
Yeah.
Because we have control of everything. It all gets down to our abilities. Like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, that was a point that he made that I actually agreed with. Let's see if I can actually find it here. Where was that? It's the idea of maybe it was in the dual identities section. Let's see if I can find it.
The whole identity, I think that's absolutely critical. Who are you? Identity, absolutely. It's one of the things I just loved about this chapter. There were some things that just, yes.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm looking to see if I can find this. I should have highlighted it.
Did you find it?
Not yet. Do you have it?
So, one of the things that's, going back, because I don't want to go forward, is this, the whole, he's going to end up talking about our real enemy is spiritual forces. And yes, and that's one of the things that in modern Christian theology we don't have, is the what could be described as the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, and coupled with Psalm 82. And that is saying that worldview says that that there are spiritual powers that are working through people and governments to move humanity more and more evil, and God is judging them. And that's that view of part of that view of governments that we just don't see, and we don't think on that level, but it's clearly part of the biblical worldview. And so, kind of, we have bigger issues, as he puts here, than just who's the next president. Well, there's a bigger problem than that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, well, I haven't found it yet, but effectively the idea is that it's not a top-down influence; it's a bottom-down influence. I mean, bottom-up influence.
Yes, I saw that. That we're supposed to influence from bottom up, not from top down. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not finding that place, but it's like when we put.
I don't remember where I did it. Oh, yes, there it is. For me, it's page 136. It's in the section of Be the Church. The church conquers and subverts the state from below, not from above. Paul wasn't interested in a top-down approach. Yeah. The church is a grassroots movement, as the kingdom is not a fully grown tree.
Yeah. And that really resonated with me, that Paul wasn't going in hoping that he would become a political power. Like once I get power, all of a sudden I'm going to be able to kind of push this stuff down, and it's, the way is going to rule. It's going to be working with people, having the opportunity to spread the gospel and reaching people on a personal, individual, deeper level that would then move things up.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what would happen if Paul would have come in and then like caught the ear of Caesar, and all of a sudden like, oh, well, we kind of saw what happened with that, with Nero, or when Christianity became the state religion, which will lead us into the other topic, but that the Christianity becoming the official religion was detrimental.
And there's been some really negative long-term effects of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to go to that one other section?
That he says, the best way to be politically subversive is not marching downtown or seeking to install new judges who agree with us. It's like, but we are supposed to seek to install judges and politicians who agree with the politic, the ethos, the morals of the kingdom, right?
Yeah. That's where we, and I don't think you and I necessarily disagree with that. It is putting hope into individuals that are ultimately flawed, and thinking that through them that the kingdom is going to be brought together, that we're going to have a utopia on earth. It's going to ebb and flow. We're going to have times where, things are going really well, and we think, oh, we got it figured out. And then times when it's garbage.
It's like, yes, be subversive, yet in the sense of be salt and light, be, trying to move individuals to be Jesus, to be like Jesus, to be believers in Jesus. Do all of that, including your civic duty of voting for people who are going to enact policies that are beneficial for the nation, beneficial for the spread of Christianity, but just don't put your hope in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's such a core key idea. You can't trust that that's going to bring you the eternal kingdom that you want.
Yeah. And to add a kind of a shade to that, if we go back to the topic of kind of fear-based influence, that So I think sometimes we confuse voting for or putting somebody into power that represents our morality is that somebody is telling us what our morality is supposed to be, as opposed to a more like a pure Christian view. Like, we are in a position where through fear somebody can say, here's the terrible thing that's going to happen if this doesn't occur, put this person in power, as opposed to this person has integrity. They're not coming in writing on a specific topic or wedge issue. They're coming in with, here is a person, I think of like George W. Bush, and I don't think he was a great president, but I think he's a really good man, and who loves Jesus. You want somebody with that heart that is not related to a specific issue, but somebody who is trying to live. Jimmy Carter, also not a great president, really good man. But we want to, in my mind, we want people whose lives are representative of the lives that we would expect from a good Christian.
And that's a little bit of a question that we have to, I think, wrestle with. And it comes back to what we said earlier of just assume every government is corrupted. Every politician is too. They're all nothing. Just assume that in everything. Okay. Then, so why do you vote for one person over another? It seems to me that the answer is, what are their policies? What are they going to actually do?
Yeah.
Versus, and just assume they're all, in this case, both Kamala and Trump are both corrupt people. Both are evil sinners, just like me and you.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
and this is, and sorry, I'm dominating today. It's like, because what are we going to do as Christians one day when you get two clearly anti-Christian people up there? You get one who's a Muslim and another one who's an avowed Satanist. Who are you going to vote for then?
Well, and this kind of comes back to the idea of, do you expect that this country, right?
Oh yeah,
right.
I know.
So, this country is a temporary thing. It's imposed by flawed humans. So, if our choices are between, if we are presented with two truly unacceptable options, and I mean truly, not fear-based, oh, that person is going to do terrible things. It's this going back to considering churches and the temporary nature of Mark Driscoll's church, Mars Hill up in Seattle. Well, it was a powerful church. God doesn't need it anymore. Boom, it's gone. The United States is the same thing. If God says I don't need this and it's not serving me, boom, it's gone. So I kind of come to the idea that I think we should vote for people we think are going to represent policies that we care about. And also, if they don't win, they don't win, and you move on.
Right. It's what's going to help the kingdom best. What's going to be, and I love that point in there, which is what I've thought, is do the Jeremiah principle of seek the good of the city that you're in. Yeah. And if that means you're countercultural to both parties, then you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's best. You're trying to do what's best for the country. That is.
If I could draw a kind of a different, maybe create a different metaphor. I've got a friend whose father's really sick, and maybe pancreatic cancer. And when I pray for him, which I do, I pray for what I really would like to happen, and then I usually conclude the prayer with, God, whatever glorifies you
Yeah.
the most, that's going to happen, because we know that bad things are going to happen.
That's a great parallel. Yeah. We would like to see this happen, but what really matters is that you get glory, Jesus, whatever that is, and recognizing our limitation of knowing what really is best.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Wow. Okay. We didn't even get to talk about the thing that we were debating before we started.
It'll probably be part of the next week.
Yeah, that's good. All right, we want to put a pin in it for now.
I know it's almost 3. Yeah, I think we probably should stop.
All right.
See what happens when we don't talk for like a month on this topic?
Yeah, I know. I hope this has been helpful I appreciate you too.
Trying to be faithful. That's what this whole podcast is about, is trying to be faithful and figuring out how do we follow Jesus, man. And it's not always simple and easy.
No, it's generally not. No.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all on Sunday. I'm on gonna keep working in Psalm 23. So.
Oh, excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. You guys take care.
See you Sunday.